Welcome everyone to Comprehending Comprehension, Conversations with Trina and Doug. I hope you guys are in for some good fun. Doug, do you want to start us off on our instructions?
Yeah,
Or
well, so this is a live audience interactive sort of conversation. So we would love to hear from you. We would love for you to talk out loud with us. We love that. Turn your videos on. And also, please feel free to just blow up that chat. Trina and I and Megan and all of our other friends who are with us here, we'll monitor that chat. And we really want to have a conversation. This is how we all learn together. Um,
quickly, we know that Tina Pickford is from Sydney, Australia, but we don't know where everyone else is from. So put it in the chat while we're going through our instructions and boring
Beautiful.
stuff. Okay, tell us
Yeah,
where you're from.
well, and I mean, as you can see, this is totally unscripted, right? This is not some kind of scripted thing, and obviously, this is not a super formal thing. This is really just us having a conversation with people about some topics that we think are pretty interesting and relevant. Uh, it's for anyone interested in comprehension, researchers, educators, reading specialists, SLPs, behavior analysts, parents, and Trina and I are going to ask a few questions about our topic, and then we're just going to let the conversation evolve. And sometimes we don't know where it's going to go,
Well,
that's
most of the time we don't know where it's going.
this is true.
But we also, if you don't know, Doug and I, we have a long term relationship where we thrive on our conflict and we learn very well from that. So we might have some, just talking about some things that are just not clear, maybe some things that we get confused about in this place of literacy, especially around comprehension, which is kind of our motivation for doing this, is we believe and we see that there are many misunderstandings about comprehension. And so we try to just speak up, make sure that we're engaged in the conversation so people are thinking critically about it. Okay. All right. Thank you so many people for turning on your cameras. This is awesome. It is,
Trina,
yes, go ahead.
well, I just wanted to introduce you.
Oh, okay. You can introduce me.
Well, I just wanted to say that so everyone knows who you are, and they probably already do, but Trina's a professor in the Department of Applied Behavioral Science and director of Juniper Gardens Children's Project at the University of Kansas. And she just barely had a huge party, by the way, at Juniper Gardens, a garden party. So
Yes.
great. So that's Trina.
Hi. All right. Well, Doug Peterson, my buddy here, he's a Vance Masteller Endowed Research Chair in Child Language Disorders and a professor in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders at Baylor University in Lamo, Waco, Texas.
Whatever. This is paradise. I love this place, by the way.
Okay,
So
I'll
yeah.
let you love it. You did
All
choose to live there for several days a week.
right. It's wonderful. By the way, and you probably know this, but we are audio and video recording this so that it can be made available to others, just so you all know. So, are we ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay, Trina, you kick us off here. What are we
Okay,
doing?
well, so usually we start with why this topic? And I'm okay to open it up and I want you guys to guess why we want to talk about this topic of myth busting around assessment and intervention for, enhancing comprehension. All right. It's all right. You can talk to us.
Myth busting.
Myth
Okay.
busting. Why is it important to bust myths? Why is it important to say these are the things that we probably shouldn't be doing?
About language comprehension.
Yeah, about comprehension.
Sure. There's a lot of myths out there. You're right. Not about Bigfoot right now, but the conversation could go to Bigfoot eventually. You never
That,
know.
that's why we bring them back. Ooh, is it about knowledge building? Mm.
Hmm.
Are
Okay,
you seeing the chat? I don't see this in the chat. Where is
that's
this?
not in the chat. But I
Oh,
have to say, I think that there's interest in this topic, whether or not they know why we're talking about it. What do you guys think? You guys are interested, right? Because it is a little ambiguous. Okay. Well, I will tell you my primary reason is because um, there are so many holdover uh, procedures in education. I've got a couple quotes for you. Peter DeWitt says, our education system has a hoarding problem, meaning educators often add new initiatives without letting go of ineffective ones, leading to overwhelm and distraction from what truly works. All right. So I'm sure if many of you are probably teachers or speech language pathologists or administrators, this is common. We hear teachers say, I have got too many things. I cannot fit everything in. Right. Well, likely we've got some holdovers. We've got some things that probably should be taken away. Here's another quote by Doug Reeves. When was the last time in education anyone heard of de-implementation? All we do is pile one thing on top of another, and then we don't. Wonder why it didn't work. So, planned, purposeful abandonment of the old and of the unrewarding is a prerequisite to successful pursuit of the new and highly promising. So, we have to clear space, right? And I'm not I don't think Doug and I are confrontational for fun, although sometimes with each other we are, but not with our fellow researchers or other people in the field. So it's not like we're trying to point out these are like bad things. It's simply we're caring about what's going on in the classrooms with those teachers, and they are overwhelmed because they are trying to do everything that anybody has ever recommended to them. And so if we don't pull something out when we put better things in, that's just a sure way of that good thing not working, right?
Yeah. And Trina, I just want to say something. Our friends here have probably heard of de-implementation.
Mm-hmm.
If they have seen like a podcast, right? Like Sold a Story, Emily Hanford's podcast, that podcast is so much about de-implementation, and it's about de-implementing a specific practice for word recognition, right? For decoding, they have three queuing. So I think that there's been a pretty good movement on de-implementation on the phonics side, on those lower strands of Scarborough's rope. I don't think we're
Right.
anywhere near there though when it comes to language, right?
So do you think we're ready for the language and reading comprehension to start clearing the way for better things? What do you guys think? And I'm still waiting for somebody to unmute themselves and say something to us, Doug. Come on, come on. Okay, so Melissa says she's never heard of de-implementation. So even though there's probably a wide range of understanding about this, right?
Trina, I might jump in. Hi, Trina and
I
Doug.
I saw
Oh,
you.
hey guys.
I saw you, James.
How are you doing?
Good, good.
Okay.
We're
Look,
excellent.
I just want to back up Doug's point. I mean, obviously, we're in the process of a huge de-implementation in our system of schools. We've got 116 primary schools, and we've had a new syllabus come out. So we've had to de-implement ways of teaching reading, which pretty much was a whole language / balanced
Mhm.
literacy approach. And now going to, I suppose I'll call it the science of reading. So that's been a good journey, and the two of you have been an important part of that and continue to be. So I'll say thank you, but I totally agree. You know, you can't just add something on. You've actually got to try and
Mhm.
change mindsets, work with people, bring them along, look at the evidence. There's lots of things that you need to do in the background, and we're continuing to do, but it's been successful up to this point in time, but it's probably 18 months, 2 years into the journey already. So
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for
Yep.
sharing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Thanks, James.
it's a real issue. So like we're working with a lot of teachers across the state of New Mexico, and they are just absolutely fabulous teachers. And that is the question they are always asking us is, where do I find the time? How do I actually get this evidence-based language instruction happening in my classroom? How do I fit it in the ELA block? That's a very difficult question to answer if no one is ready or willing to get rid of practices that are not evidence-based. And it really should. Sometimes I don't want to speak that plainly because it sounds like I'm being rude, but the reality is that you've got to stop doing things that do not have research evidence behind them. And many, many of our programs that are supposed to be building language do not have research evidence to support that they actually do that. And it's time to move over to things that have research. So I think that it's a really big topic, right? Getting rid of the things that don't work.
I used your soapbox to transition into a slide.
Yay.
Okay.
I saw it. It looks smooth.
Okay. So I'm going to just present a couple faulty beliefs that I think are pervading schools and maybe preventing us from de-implementing some of these practices or installing new and better, more promising strategies. I'm just going to say a couple of them, okay? There's actually more than this, but it's overwhelming to do too many at once. So I'm just going to focus on three. Instruction on language comprehension comes after word recognition is established. Okay, so most people will say we work on comprehension after the decoding or word recognition is settled. And so that really means that they delay intensive explicit instruction on comprehension or language in general until after decoding is set. Another reason why they might do that is because there's a belief that to promote reading comprehension, you must use text, right? And one of the reasons why that you have to use text, this is the myth, the faulty belief, is that spoken language is not sufficiently complex. All right, so we're gonna tackle this one too. All right, and then the third one that I think we can really cover tonight is that language, most people understand that language is acquired naturally. And it's true. Like you just raise somebody, they don't need explicit instruction to learn the language of their community. Okay. But you can't overgeneralize it to say that it doesn't need explicit instruction. But yet that's the myth and that's the excuse. Often we hear is no, we don't need to teach language explicitly because people acquire that naturally. Okay. All right. Doug.
Hmm.
So you want to take on the first one? I'm going to,
Okay. Well, yes. And I'm thinking about the last. Wait, put the first one back up again. Hold on.
the first one is about like why should we wait?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like what's that? What's it at the core? Like why are people waiting?
Yeah, because I mean, that really is a faulty belief. The idea that, you know what, I actually think it comes from a mantra that people like to say a lot. They like to say, learn to read, and then
Read to learn.
read to learn. Yeah. And that of course is not what that slogan means at all, right? To wait. But I think that sort of fuels this myth a little bit.
Mhm.
The issue is you don't have to wait. Why? uh, Can I back up? The issue really is just simply, literally taking the simple view of reading for what it says, that it is word recognition times language comprehension. And I mean a literal interpretation and application of the simple view. So if it is really word recognition times language comprehension, then you can build language comprehension very early on. We already do that. Our children already are developing language from an infancy on, and we can accelerate that. So waiting makes no sense at all, actually. Why would you wait for them to just be able to decode? And actually, really, people wait until they can decode complex texts, and then
Yeah.
they start building.
Yeah.
That is waiting years
Mhm.
and years and years. It's time wasted. It's not necessary.
Yeah. So one of the sources of this, like what I sit and wonder, like, where does that come from? Why do people think that we build comprehension after we establish word recognition? I have a hypothesis or a theory, one of the two, that it is the language that we use to describe those skills. So, for example, alphabet knowledge, phonological awareness, and beginning word level reading has been described as foundational skills. Okay, the word foundation itself suggests that it comes before and other things are built on afterward. So, foundation is essential skills that form the base upon which other things or knowledge are built. But I don't think that those are actually foundational skills. I think spoken language is the foundational skill because you can't even learn phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, and decoding without good language skills. And I think we're also seeing in schools that we're putting in so much effort on word recognition And it's because there's a huge portion of those kids who do not have the oral language abilities in preparation for those skills. So if we flip this around and said spoken language is the foundation of literacy, we would be doing oral language promotion and good, strong instruction first, and then we would build phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge on top of that. And I happen to have done some research in this space with really young kids and tried to teach phonological awareness in like the fall of their, if they're like in 4 years old at the pre-kindergarten before they go to kindergarten. And you know what? It doesn't work very well. It's a lot of dang hard work. But if we work on the oral language first and then move phonological awareness to the spring, guess what happens? They can learn it really quickly.
Okay, hang on a minute. Hold on a
I know
minute.
I'm like just getting to know.
Well, you are really moving into some dangerous territory. I think you got to be really clear here because you're going to start sounding like Ken Goodman or something. This,
Oh,
you
oh,
know
really?
how this
You're
could
fighting
sound.
with me now.
Well, I'm just saying, you know how this could sound like a whole language thing that you're
But
proposing. I reject that with
But
all
Doug,
my
I
heart.
actually think that's the reason why this doesn't happen is because it's like it's presented as like phonics versus language. And it's like, no, 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 right? Like we need both of those things to
Yeah.
build comprehension. We just have to allocate the appropriate language resources to the appropriate tasks at the appropriate times. And it's not as easy as this versus this. Sorry.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah.
enough defense?
Well, yeah, I mean, because obviously we know this really is beautifully established in the research that explicit systematic phonics instruction absolutely builds students' ability to decode. It builds the orthographic mapping. Well, orthographic mapping when it's paired with meaning, of course.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah. So
okay.
I was actually on my way there. I know that like I'm going to make the assumption that many people in this chat, they're working very hard to build those word recognition skills and they're putting in a ton of energy. But there's going to be a portion of those kids who have a difficulty moving from the mechanical sounding out stages to the fast automaticity that's needed for orthographic mapping. And one of the potential reasons for that is that we have not done enough work in the semantics, which is, like building meaning in that language. And we know from the orthographic mapping research, you have to have phonological, orthographic, and meaning to get that fast automaticity word recognition going. And so we're actually slowing down the kids' abilities to acquire automatic word reading when we're not promoting strong language skills as the foundation.
So how literal should we take the simple view of reading? Somebody just posted in a forum. It's a very, very well-known forum with a lot of researchers, and they said, we have had now a focus on explicit systematic phonics instruction, and we've still not seen gains in reading comprehension. And they said, and we don't know why. And I was actually dumbfounded to read
They
that
don't know
last
why?
part. Yes, and we don't know why. And I'm
Okay,
thinking,
Plaz, do you
well, go
think
ahead.
our audience here knows why? If there's been so much systematic, explicit work on phonics, and yet it's not changing their reading comprehension scores, do you know why?
Yes, because you need both parts.
Yes. So in other words,
mean,
they have been
as-
doing,
yeah.
okay, keep going, Carrie.
Yeah, well, as we look at the simple view of reading, we know that reading comprehension is the outcome. That's the product. And so therefore, we need to have both. If you have the phonics piece, that decoding, but you have a 0 with your word, with your language recognition, well, guess what? You still don't get that, the end result, right? And then the other way around, you could have that rich language, but not have the decoding piece, and you still get a 0. And that's why both pieces are equally important. So I had alluded to, yeah, I'm all about it.
Awesome, Karen. Okay, good. I figured you guys knew, which is probably why you're here, right? Most people like have found us when we're talking about, hey guys, don't forget about the language piece. But just as a FYI, Doug and I started really as like word recognition people. Like that's my background, phonics, oral reading fluency, all those things. But we were clinicians and educators and discovered that, oh my goodness, nobody knows how to do this other piece. And it was absolutely missing. We're teaching kids to word call and they weren't able to comprehend. So we had to go back and get our PhDs so we could do something about it.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's so many great comments in here, and
I
I
know.
hope you're keeping up with the chat because it's just these comments are beautiful. I just wanted to just reinforce what you're saying. The people are still pushing the idea, and this actually did come from edu celebrities. This idea that if we get rid of 3Qing and we just focus on systematic explicit phonics instruction, we're going to solve the reading crisis. And I feel like that story, which we have been sold, is a tragic story because it sets us up for considerable frustration and disappointment, right?
Mhm.
It's not because, and I'm not saying that in any like we have all this knowledge that nobody else knows. It is really just going back to
Oh yeah.
theories that have been beautifully established, right?
And actually, I was just about to read some quotes because I also say like Doug and I are not that smart. We did not come up with this by ourselves. We just read other smart people, right? So here's a couple quotes. This one is by Dickinson, McCabe, and Essex, 2006. Early language skills are foundational, not just consequential to later reading comprehension. Okay. And because they take so much longer to develop, right? And it takes lifetimes to develop good language skills, we need to start early and be deliberate and intentional about it from the day one. Okay. Another quote I have is word reading is built upon a foundation of speech and oral language, and it is an essential teaching outcome. So we should be teaching that. This comes from Ola and Gentry in, I don't know if we've got some spelling people from Brainwords. That's from Brainwords. And anyway, I won't go into that. Okay, and then one other piece I want to say, the reason why we want to make sure people understand that spoken language is this foundation for all literacy and all language or all learning is because if we can do that well, we're actually helping kids learn to decode quicker, right? And we're going to get to orthographic mapping faster, okay? In addition, we're going to prevent reading comprehension problems because you can't possibly teach everything they need for third grade reading, like high stakes tests in third grade. They have to accumulate that knowledge and those complex language repertoires for ages, right? Many, many years. Okay, I'm ready to move to the next one. Anybody else want to say anything more about this myth before we move on?
Can I just ask a question and see if anybody else kind of agrees with this? I'm an SLP, working K-4, and I have seen that kids coming in now are coming in with much lower language skills, the ones that require my assistance. Like they're much more, like there's a much bigger deficit. I'm thinking a lot of like, COVID babies, having been home a lot, the exposure to that language is lower. So I'm thinking we're going to see an even bigger crisis going over these next 4 or 5 years. But I also know that these kids, when I do take them on and we're working on those foundational skills that I'm in charge of, not the reading portion, like I'm working on, like, do you know what a WH question actually means? And it's that basic. Like they don't know what who, they should be talking about the characters. They don't know what should be talking about other, like, and the where should be talking about the setting. They don't make those connections with those words. So it's like, how do they comprehend if they can't even comprehend the questions to know if they're
Exactly.
comprehending?
Yep, there you go. And that's just it is like really educators. I mean, if some of you are teachers, I have heard many teachers say, I was trained how to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, but these kids need language, right? We just don't get the training around language, but language is everything and language is necessary and every teacher is actually a language teacher. So if we could get more of that as the foundation, the other things would be built much easier. Um, Thank you for your comment, Megan. And yes,
I
I am worried about our future. These kids are going to really struggle.
It is something though that we do know how to address, which I think there's a message of positivity here. There is a bright hope and a bright future because we do, I mean, nothing's perfect, and of course we're all still doing research, but we do have a very good understanding on how to build language, how to help children improve their language. And of course, even though the SLPs, we don't use these terms very often of like systematic, explicit, cumulative, diagnostic. Oftentimes we'll adopt like Teresa Ukrainet's repeated, intensive, systematic, explicit, her RISE acronym, but it's the same, it's all coming from the same research. And we absolutely do know how to help children. And it is systematic, right? You do start simple and you build. And so I guess really the advocacy here is to just actually adopt the science. And did so who I don't know who said in here that like only half the science is being adopted.
I
But
said
that's
that. I
really
said
what's happening.
incomplete.
Incomplete. Oh, that was you. Oh my
It
gosh.
was me, but
I
I've had
quoted
practice
you.
saying that. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so do you guys remember what the second one was? The second myth that I put up? I am actually going to use a few slides for this one because I want to explain it really well. So the myth is at the top. Instruction to promote reading comprehension requires text because spoken language is not sufficiently complex. Okay, so there is a misunderstanding in this particular myth, and it goes like this. Spoken language is all low complexity language, and written language is high complexity language. Now, if we were to take the average of all spoken and written language, that is probably true. However, it doesn't mean that spoken language is always, and it has to be minimally complex, right? We can actually make spoken language with intention to be very complex. And here's a graphic to show that. Doug, I need you to explain it.
Hey, I'm talking to Kara right now in the chat.
I'm
Okay,
a, I'm like choking on a bug or something. I need
it's
to
all
swallow. I need to
I
take a
got
drink.
it. I got it. And you know, I want to plant Kara's thought in your mind for a second. She wants to talk about the balance between morphology and vocabulary instructions. So I just want to make sure we can get to that because it's really important to talk about the different strands of the rope and the extent to which we emphasize maybe one strand over another. Okay. So, but yeah, all right. You're choking on a bug. I'm sorry about that. That's weird, and I apologize. Um, Complexity of language is not really about whether it's spoken or written language. When was the last time you sent a text message, written, by the way, that was really complex? That is a written form of language that is very simple. And have you ever heard someone use oral language in a very complex way? Of course you have. There's a certain time and a place for that kind of register. Now, yes, this is true. This is true. On average, written language is more complex. No one's going to deny that. And people will say that we are written language complexity deniers. That's not true. Of course that's true. Of course it's true.
There's such a thing.
I just made it up. I can see it coming though. I know that's going to happen.
No, no, no. Okay, I'm gonna pick up from you
Okay.
right now.
You're
Okay.
feeling okay now?
Yeah,
You're good?
I
Okay,
think
good.
so. All right. Anyway, the point here is that if we can make the spoken language complex, right, then we can work on comprehension and all of the strands of the upper strands of Scarborough's rope, all of those strands, we can work on them in the spoken modality prior to their fluency in word recognition that would alleviate the decoding as a barrier to work on it in the written language modality. So the discourse type is actually what matters more for complexity. So conversation is generally low complexity. So even in a novel and there's dialogue written, well, that's written language, but the dialogue is actually quite simple because it's conversation. Narrative is another discourse type that is a moderate complexity because people are usually narrating about their personal experiences, but it uses a lot of causal and temporal complex sentences. And you can embed lots of high academic vocabulary words in narratives. And then expository content generally is designed to teach like domain specific words and concepts, things that are unknown. And so it's generally has more complexity to it than the others. Okay. And someone was going to say, yeah, but what about read alouds? Just like Karen did. Okay. So I get you. This is the reason why most of the recommendations for language comprehension is about reading aloud, right? That so that the students are exposed to complex language that are in books. But guess what? It helps them hear the complex language, but the students themselves are not using complex language. And remember, listening is not the foundation of literacy, spoken language is. Okay, so what we're really after is to get kids to use the complex language in an oral or a spoken modality. Okay, there's a couple of research studies. This one I like from Sugat. It's a little more complicated, but I'm going to simplify it. That they were learning words, vocabulary words, and they were comparing 3 different conditions. One condition was an oral storytelling, another was an adult read aloud, and the other one was the students were reading to themselves. And what they found is that students would learn more words, incidentally, through oral storytelling than when the adult reads complex books to them. Okay, and then that was better than students reading to themselves. So there's something about this oral language modality that assists. And it's interesting because their discussion section speculates on, well, why that could be. And then this is another quote I use all the time. Comprehension building interventions may be most beneficial when presented in a format that does not require extensive other skills like decoding. So many scientists, many people in the literacy space believe that we can do good comprehension instruction without text.
Hey, Trina.
Yeah.
You know Howard Goldstein? Good dude.
Yeah, of course I know Howard Goldstein.
No, you do. Amazing researcher.
Uh-huh.
Look at the, I just want to highlight something in the, this, by the way, this is our friend Teresa. This is her book. I just wanted to highlight something. This is 1984. I just love this sentence so much. This is Howard. I don't know what Howard was doing in 1984. Was he getting his dissertation? Doing it? I don't know. Anyways, here he says, Howard, actually says Goldstein, I apologize. 1984 reported no, just listen to this, reported no improvement for children with language impairment exposed to models without an opportunity for production of the target form. This is 1984. I love how Teresa doesn't really like have to provide hardly any like recent references. It's like, hello, we put this to bed a long time ago. The way that you learn language is not just listening to it, but also producing it. Just wanted to punctuate.
So I want to keep going with this theme, and I want to see if Karen gets satisfied with this. We are not saying that reading aloud to children is a bad practice. That is not the practice. Or that is not the myth. That's a good practice. Everyone should do it standardly.
Right.
But do I think that is sufficiently deliberate and intense and explicit in order to teach the spoken language that students are going to need for reading comprehension and writing? No. And those are very different things. And one of the reasons is that even though dialogic reading is the standard, that's what we want kids to be conversing. Did you hear what I just said? Dialogic. That's conversation. So even if they're hearing complex language, what kids are actually speaking is the low complex forms of that language. They're not using the high complexity or moderate complexity forms. And we know if they don't speak and use it, it's much slower to acquire. Okay. So that's the primary reason. I would think about it like this, is like read aloud is like standard, it's universal. Everybody should be read to, right? Everybody should be spoken to, everybody. That's what we hear. But there are going to be some who are going to absolutely need systematic, explicit oral language instruction. And that's what we're talking about, because most people don't think that that's even possible. They
Here's
think that it happens implicitly. They think that language is acquired through listening. That's not the full story. Sorry, Doug.
no, sorry to interrupt. I just was thinking, and now I don't know if I have my thought anymore, but what was I going to say? I think that the point that you're
You
making
might have just been thinking, shut up, Trina.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. I think that the point here, of course, is that the production. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You said you think. You think that.
Oh, I
I just
shouldn't have
want to
said
say,
think.
yeah, I just feel like this is not, we're not really talking about an opinion here when it comes to learning language. And oh, I know what I was going to say also. Um, Words matter. And when someone in a textbook, for example, says, we need to focus on language and focus on language comprehension, and then they put in parentheses, i.e., read alouds. In other words, read alouds. That is a tragedy, in my opinion, because they're saying that focusing on language is the exact same thing as doing a read aloud. And that is not true. And that's not where the research evidence is. We just did a study comparing read alouds to a systematic, explicit, cumulative diagnostic language intervention, pairing read alouds to structured literacy, and the effect sizes. The significance was significant, the difference between them, and the effect size was large also between them. I'm not saying that read alouds, like you said, Trina, we have to be
Yeah.
careful, right? We don't want to read aloud deniers either,
No,
because
we're not.
you know,
We're not.
giving kids exposure to authentic text is a beautiful thing, and they need to hear that authentic text, but you've got to produce it to learn a language. And when we talk about learning a language, we are talking about learning complex language that they do not use at home, they don't use outside at the playground. And how do you accelerate it? You accelerate it like an SLP would accelerate anybody's language, through structured literacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, Karen, I know you want to say something.
Well, no, I love the conversation. And it's really funny because sometimes you use words and you think everyone interprets those words the way you meant them. And I guess I just wanted to clarify when I said read alouds and the complex language and so forth, I tap back into the vocabulary that I used to naturally talk with my children about. So, for instance, when I was working with very young children, we learned the words deciduous and coniferous, and we had a song about it. And they learned what was what, and it was really funny because those two simple terms were just used throughout the year. It was just crazy. But when I said read aloud, after teaching them about deciduous and coniferous, I then read them a book called Have You Seen Trees?
Mm.
Now, the words deciduous and coniferous were never actually in that read aloud. But on every page, as I turned the page, I'd say, well, what kind of tree is this? And the kids would all like yell, deciduous, deciduous. And then I would say, how do we know that? And they're like, because they lose their leaves. Or we'd have all these different
Awesome.
conversations. And, and then we'd go, and it just so happens in this particular book, they said deciduous way more than they said coniferous. And it wasn't until like the end of the story when it says, what about wintergreen? And they all yell out coniferous or whatever.
That's
So my
great.
point is that I totally get it. And when I said read alouds, that was kind of what I was thinking.
Mhm.
And so I just want you to know, I totally agree. You can't just read them a story and then hope that they just by osmosis like get the
Yeah.
word. You have to really be intentional about it. So I guess I just want people to think about how you can be really intentional with some pretty complex text. Children's books have some wonderful words in them.
Mhm.
I think that's such a great example.
Yeah.
And I really applaud you for really demonstrating fabulous instructional techniques for improving vocabulary with these multiple exemplars and embedding it in context. I mean, I think that's just absolutely perfect. I love it. And I also just want to say I love that you highlight that in a way you're highlighting for us that there's maybe not really such a thing as a difficult word, right? Because you have kindergartners who can say Tyrannosaurus Rex, or they sure try, right? Vocab is really about exposure. Noam Chomsky is not going to argue with us about that one. You're not born with vocab. You learn the vocab that you are exposed to and that you're required to produce. And if you went around using words like that, like coniferous and other words that are really quote unquote large, it's not going to be hard for those kids at all. It's just the language that they use.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I want to maybe build off of read alouds because I think that has been like the standard practice. And I agree that it can be done well if very intentional. However, I think some people are likely familiar with the Phil Capon study where he observed or they observed all these classrooms where reading instruction was supposed to be happening. And they were kind of, documenting how much reading comprehension instruction was happening. And they found generally that not that much reading comprehension instruction was happening. And those that were not high quality read aloud with good dialogue and conversation. And ultimately, they landed on this is actually very, very difficult to do, right? You don't have this like very clear lesson plan. There's not a scope and sequence. Things don't necessarily build on each other. There's a lot of like unknowns or variables that a teacher might have to control to make those like reading to children or students to be highly effective for reading comprehension. So Doug and I then would posit this question, what about structured literacy? Like, I'm assuming that most of you understand some basic tenets of structured literacy. Well, like, does the read aloud, even the best dialogic, intentional version of read aloud, does it conform to the characteristics of structured literacy? And is there possibly another way? Like Doug said, the IE would suggest that reading aloud to children is the only way to build language comprehension. And we would argue that that's not the only way. So, structured literacy, can we do it? And that's actually the third myth that I mentioned is that, like, if language is acquired naturally, explicit instruction would not be necessary, right? And that's sometimes the reason for not exploring maybe more potent methods of building comprehension. Those upper strands of Scarborough's rope, they are complex, they are challenging. And how do you do it with structured literacy principles? Okay, let's just stop right there and see what you guys think. Can it be done? Can we teach the upper strands like we do the lower strands explicitly, systematically, sequentially, and cumulatively? Okay, there's some
I
comments.
say yes to a degree from Kara. Kara's like, yes to a degree.
Okay, the rest of them are still formulating their answers, right? Maybe, maybe, maybe. Okay. All right. Well, let me just show you a couple things. So structured literacy actually comes from the International Dyslexia Association, and I would just want you to like try to take this in for just a minute, okay? There's a lot going on this slide. But at the top is the who, and it kind of portrays a multi-tiered system where there's going to be students in these various places, and you're going to have various experts like teachers versus an expert instructor or like an SLP. But in the main square on the left is the what, okay? And the left column of word recognition is phonemes, graphemes, morphemes, syllable and stress patterns, orthographic conventions. And on the right side under comprehension, you're going to get vocabulary, background knowledge, sentence structure, grammar, text structure, critical thinking. And those actually map on to those upper strands of Scarborough's rope if that's the heuristic you guys use. Okay, so the what is, yes, structured literacy applies to all of those. And structured literacy looks like they've got it defined as integrated language, reading, and writing instruction, supporting automaticity, fluency, and proficiency. Now, if you get over to the right side, you've got direct and systematic, mastery oriented. It seems to me that Like, I guess my question is, do you think that this graphic tells us that the things on explicit, sequential, cumulative, highly interactive, multimodal, do those fit for the comprehension? Do they mean for those to be applied there? Or is it just the scaffolded, sufficient practice, targeted feedback, data-driven? Some comments I want to see. I'm missing. Doug, what do you think?
I haven't seen this before.
Oh yeah, it's their updated graphic for structured literacy. It came out in May.
So Trina, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so if I've not seen anything like this, I have no background knowledge to be like, yes, it can totally be done. So it's hard for me to imagine if I have no idea as a teacher what this would look like. And that's the comments that I see here is like, you can't teach us systematically. You can't teach us. It's hard to teach it explicitly. So they're missing the components because it just the how is not there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I guess that is the part that, remember, most everything we've talked about to this point has been what other people have researched. Like, that's not the kind of research we do. We build off of everybody else's research that tells us that spoken language is actually the foundation and that it's important for decoding, it's important for comprehension, it's important for writing. But what Doug and I have done in our research is really flesh out this how. Okay, let me see what my next slide is. Let's see if I have that. Okay, I'm gonna just walk through this. I don't know what our time is. Doug, interrupt me if it gets to be unhelpful. Okay, so one of the pieces is that these terms in those upper strands, and even the ones that were on the previous slide, they're kind of not very clear about what we're talking about, and they don't necessarily lead to what to teach. And so one of the things that we've done is change them into language that we can teach very clearly to kids. So vocabulary, that's easy. Those are words. But specifically, what kind of words? General academic words. So like in the tiered categorical system, like a tier 2 word. Those are general academic words. Multiple meaning words. Words like ground and center and things that have multiple meanings. We've got to teach that intentionally because relying on kids to just discover the different meanings is going to be a little risky. And then domain specific words, which is probably most aligned with like knowledge building. And then morphologically complex words. We must teach the morphemes in words. All right, sentences. So language structures are really about like complex sentences using subordinate clauses and relative pronouns, things that make that very complex. But also morphologically complex words could also be in there. And then discourse is really this literacy knowledge. Like every time I looked at Scarborough's rope and I'd be like, what the heck are they talking about here? Right. But this is my interpretation for instructional purposes, and I'll show you why. And then this verbal reasoning, really, we get, right now, there's so much debate and conversation about knowledge and strategies. The inferential strategies are one of the strands and is necessary, but so is knowledge and content. It's a strand. So I guess this is a myth, Doug. Don't you think that there's a myth that, you know, a knowledge-rich curriculum is going to be sufficient for reading comprehension, or reading
Yes.
comprehension strategies are going to be sufficient for reading comprehension?
Yes, I had some reservations about posting something yesterday on social media because what somebody said, we're using UFly for word recognition, and and then they said, what should we use for knowledge? And I said, well, the complement to word recognition is language, not knowledge. The question should be, what should I, actually, the person was asking, what are you all using? And I said, the question should be, what are you all using for language? And then I said, actually, the question should be, what has the most research evidence to support language? That's really the question. But, you know, I felt like maybe it was not a very nice comment because it was like I was telling somebody how they should have asked a question. But it just really was like, it just really deflated me because it was sort of like they were talking about how the simple view of reading was word recognition and knowledge. That's not it. So it's not the question. It's not what do I do about knowledge, it's what do I do about language. Sorry, I got
Yeah.
on a soapbox there, but
It's all right, but it's a good soapbox because this is actually like there are people that are driving this message. And like to quote Doug, it really is if somebody's selling you a single strand, they are selling you a story, an incorrect, incomplete story. You need all of these things. And so let me see if I have, no, I don't have it. But what was I going to say? No, I've got to have this. There we go. This is what I want.
Wait, hold up, because people just saw this awesome checklist form. You just need to tell them
Coming
what.
back to it.
All right, thank you, because we
I
have
just
like 10
thought
minutes.
this was in that order. So,
Okay.
okay. So now I want you to think about this. Okay. I'm going to explain why it's critical that we can't just use one of these strands to work. We can't just work on one of these strands and think we're going to get reading comprehension. Okay. So imagine a world, a globe, the surface, you see the continents and the ocean. Okay. Imagine that's the content. That's the content of that passage or the knowledge that's in there. Okay. But what's inside it, it's made up of discourse, which is made up of sentences, and sentences are made up of words. So they're nested words in sentences and sentences in discourse. And if you don't have a full middle, right, you actually don't get what's on the surface. You have to understand and realize that what's on the surface depends on what's in the core of this in this metaphor. Okay. And then the strategies are needed in order to connect or glue the words and the sentences together, the words in sentences and sentences in discourse, all right, and to be able to understand and infer content when there's some unknowns. So, so these dimensions, words, sentences, and discourse, they actually have patterns. These are language patterns, much like your syllable patterns that we're teaching in word recognition. So in beginning phonics, we have open symbols or syllables. And we have patterns, consonant, vowel, consonant, right? Those are patterns. Words, sentences, and discourse also have patterns. Therefore, we should be able to teach them just like we do the patterns of the phoneme grapheme blending. Okay.
okay, Trina,
Yes.
take this back around to the myth. How is this connected to the myth you're addressing?
So I'm getting to the how we can teach this in a more structured way, right?
Yeah.
So, and one big thing is that we cannot teach them splintered, right? If we teach words outside of sentences and discourse, they have like very little meaning, and you're not getting any opportunity to use inferential strategies in that process. But if we're working on language at the discourse level, we get things like words and sentences for free because they're already nested in the discourse. And we get the opportunity to work on these inferential strategies. So like this is a Bruce Perry quote that like repeated exposure to the same patterns builds the neural networks. That's how our brains learn. So we've got to make use of those patterns. I mean, that's what phonics is. It's about teaching the patterns so that they can attack a word when they recognize the patterns. That's what phonics is. We can do the same thing because these strands of language also have patterns. Okay, and I'm going to keep going with there, but I need to do the rest of it. So this part about inferential strategies, we kind of refer to it as the glue, because you do need strategies. We do need to have like the ability to identify the main idea and to infer the meaning of this word based on context. Those are all critical, but you can't have glue unless you've got the pieces that are getting glued together. So you have to have the patterns in order to have the glue together to be able to acquire and express the content or knowledge independently. Okay. I will stop there, but I'm going to go back to that other slide.
I love it. You really went into teaching mode there.
I know I did. Did you hear it? I'm so sorry, guys. I just was
No.
trying to explain my illustration, my graphic, my metaphor here.
It was good and it was beautiful and we loved it. This
Did you get
checklist.
that? He said it on recorded TV. He loves me.
This checklist right here might be useful to you. The reality is that some of us have things imposed upon us, a curriculum that we have to use. It is mandated, whether we want to buck the system or not, is potentially out of our power. Well, you can take a curriculum and shape it and modify it and make it much more aligned with evidence-based practice. This little checklist here, we've put this together, and it's something you can download, and it just simply helps you take anything, no matter how far off from the mark it is, and it helps you to turn it into something that is aligned with the research. And so hopefully it's useful to you. You can see the principles of structured literacy intervention aligned in this right here, right? Frequent student responding, direct teaching, specific and comprehensive, and so forth. And you can just ask yourself, is my language instruction like this? Is my read aloud like this? And if not, then the answer is very simply, well, then do this. Do what's on this checklist. And, it may be too much to do every single thing. We sort of put it in a bit of a hierarchy. There's a little tension between me and Trina, by the way, about where that word contextualized goes, because you can see where I probably would put the word contextualized on this list, but it's up
You
there.
can contextualize all you want, but if there's not student responding, they ain't gonna learn.
Yeah, but if there's no contextualization, they ain't gonna learn either. Bring it
That's
on.
not true. That's not true. They do learn, just slower.
Nah, they didn't even, it's not even applicable. It doesn't even generalize.
It
Anyways,
doesn't, but
later.
that's the
We'll fight
point.
later. But anyways, hopefully this is helpful to you all right here. And we just have a couple minutes left. I think it'd be great to hear from some people about their thoughts about what we're talking about these myths. And if you think we're wrong too, we certainly would really love that. We'd love to know that we're wrong now until, instead of 10 years from now. So what do you all think? What are your thoughts? Put it in the chat. Shout it out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
And just for the record, we think that there are a lot more, but we chose those three because if we can get these three ironed out and people thinking about spoken language as the foundation, and that we can make spoken language complex and we can teach it using structured literacy principles, that's half the battle.
It's only half the battle, though, because we didn't even get into assessment. We were going to talk about using closed procedures as a method for measuring comprehension, which has got me incredibly aggravated right now, but we'll just have to do it another time.
Have you
Yeah.
seen any, could I ask about if you've seen good models working and, research behind it as well with regard to, tier 3 versus tier 1 classroom instruction? And then, so you're getting the topics, you're looking at various, knowledge-based language topics, but then tier 3, the one-to-one with, the tailored approach with kids who've got unique needs, how they should go together when it comes to comprehension particularly. And so using more of what the syllabus already has and building on that where they've got weak areas, or I'm just curious to know if you've done any research around intervention tier 3 versus tier 1 for comprehension specifically. I don't know if it's on topic, but
Yeah, sorry. I mean, definitely. So, and I apologize that I was like reading through the chat and trying to listen to you at the same time, Kara, is a little challenging. But I mean, if the question is, have we done research on the tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for this approach of structured literacy intervention for language? The answer to that is absolutely. Multiple peer-reviewed publications, and not just us, of course, our colleagues. Amy Peterson's on here. She's a researcher. We all have colleagues that have been researching this. And a lot of it is in the speech language pathology world, but that's because we focus so much on language in our careers.
Oh, sorry, I probably should clarify. What I mean is when you're in a school which does not, for example, have a good structured literacy approach, whereas you're in especially if you're an SLP, you're visiting different schools, they've got different approaches, how you kind of adapt. If that makes sense. I mean, obviously, a lot of what we do, we have to go by on the fly. We've got to adapt. So just,
Let me
just any
see if I
context.
can let me see if I can get at what you're asking. So as an SLP, and you're going into a school that maybe doesn't have good structured literacy for language, like, is what you're doing in small group and one-on-one going to help them build their comprehension? Is it going to be potent enough?
Yeah, oh look, without a doubt, you can still work on it. But I guess, any research on adapting in different contexts, around, I mean, you've got to obviously input the structured approach when they're not getting the structured approach, right? But using the models that they already have and tweaking it versus going through and doing your own program, and you know what I'm saying. Like, there's just so many different ways. So I'm just curious. Yeah.
Well, I think that's difficult to give you like really specifics at this moment, but that checklist is designed for people to be able to kind of analyze their own materials and their own teaching procedures. And then you can start to make adjustments. You can see what actually doesn't align, right? I mean, sometimes it's difficult to understand what those pieces are, right? But we know that all curriculum, all materials, there's two components. There's the curriculum controlled pieces where there's like a script or the curriculum is set up that way. And then there's teacher controlled aspects. And so teacher or SLP. So like, even if you have like 3 cueing, you can supplement and do this better because those are the teacher controlled pieces. So you have to compensate for them. And the rest of that handout says a little bit about that, but you kind of have to balance. So even if you don't have great materials, you can still compensate. Now, would it be easier if you had great materials? Yes. But we've got to move there slowly. This is not a pendulum swinging. We are swinging the paradigm. Okay. It's going to take some time.
Swinging the paradigm. I love it. Well, and y'all, we are out of time. Thank you so much for being here with us. I mean, it was great to have this many people on here. And then
Fabulous.
this is being recorded. And of course, we'll share this conversation with everyone. So thank you all so much for joining us.
And we didn't talk as much about the de-implementation as I thought we would, but you could go back and watch the one on Sold Half a Story about the de-implementing the 3 cueing, comprehending comprehension.
Just email us and we will send you the link directly to that. It's also on our YouTube channel, but you just have to look up language dynamics.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Megan.
Love it.
All right. Well, it's been a great having a conversation with you. Doug, I didn't argue with you enough, but
well, you started rolling. I didn't want to interrupt.
I know I got in that teacher mode.
It was good though. We had things to learn from you and it was beautiful. So yeah.
Well,
it's okay.
I appreciated the comments. Really. It was great.
Time.
Thanks everybody for being here. I'll send you a link to the recording and have a wonderful day or good night.